So I'm really excited to be here today. Before we start, a little bit of a self-advocacy share, because I think it's only fair. If I know you, you know me. My name is Jenn Feldman. I go by she, her pronouns. If you can't see me, I am a white woman wearing a white blouse that has flowers on it, glasses, and some black pants that I will admit to you are maternity pants because I picked up the wrong ones at the store. I am, and I don't need them. I am neurodivergent as well, so this is going to be chaos for 12 minutes, and I'm going to set that timer for myself because otherwise this is not going to go well. So I work at Specialist Sterna. Don't worry about pronouncing the name. It means the specialists in Danish. The only thing I ask is that you don't call us Specialisterine. We were started about 21 years ago in Denmark by a man named Torkel Sona, and his goal, after learning that his child was autistic, was that he heard a lot of "I can't," right? Your kid isn't going to be able to do this. He's not going to be able to do that. He's not going to be able to work. He's not going to be able to speak. And yet he, at 7, could draw the entire map of Europe with every single country in it to perfection. And so he thought that that was nonsense. And he worked for a telecommunications organization. And he also realized that in discussions with leadership, what they were really looking for were the skills that his child was presenting, and yet they had a massive employment shortage. So I appreciate the speaker before me, because she kind of set me up, right? We see this today. It's not like that's gone away. And so my organization is a global 501c3 nonprofit, and we focus on neuro-inclusive employment. And I'm going to explain to you a little bit about what that is. Our mission is a lofty one, admittedly. We will never get there in my lifetime. But we hope that it is to enable 1 million jobs for neurodivergent individuals. Now, I didn't use the word create, and that was on purpose. I used the word enable, because every single one of you is responsible for enabling a neuro-inclusive workforce. And so that's what we're going to talk about. Our tagline is to employ different thinking. And what that means is that we want to challenge you to think about things differently than the status quo. We want you to hire people who have different minds. I am good at my job. I cannot be an accountant. That doesn't mean that I have to be an accountant. There are plenty of people who are accountants. I need to be able to be good at my job. I need to be able to have 100 conversations in one day, and none of them are the same. I need to be able to retain an incredible amount of information, and I am an asset to my organization. And I can stand on a stage and not feel guilty telling you that. And each one of you are in your jobs because you're good at them. If you weren't, they'd let you go. So each one of our brains is valuable in our ecosystem, and you only need one of that kind of brain. We also want you to try a little bit of a different approach. The only thing that has not changed in 100 years of recruiting is the way that we recruit. Everything about business has changed. The way that we use technology, the way that we communicate with each other. If by 2040, our workforce is going to be a majority of Gen Z, that also means that by 2040, a majority of our workforce is going to be neurodivergent. So once we're in the majority, you're too late if you haven't already adjusted the way that you recruit. And so we want you to try a different approach. We have a show, don't tell model. I want you to show me you can do the job. I'm not interested in self-report. How many of you, just by show of hands, have interviewed somebody, hired them, and then realized that they lied to you the whole time? Yeah, okay, thank you for being brave. That helps you, ideally, broaden your perspective, because then you start to realize that the definition of insanity is just doing something over and over and over again, hitting your head against the wall, right? And what we really want to see is more that you are broadening the understanding that it is possible for you to recruit differently so that you include more people. So it's really important to me whenever we do these kinds of discussions to ground ourselves in some mutual understanding, because otherwise we're totally talking about different things, right? The first is that I want you to understand what disability is and what it's not. Disability is not a personal problem. It is not my body that has spina bifida, and it is not my brain that has ADHD. And that's my problem. The challenge is the environment that that person is in, both socially and in a workplace. And so disability is the conflict between the person's ability and the environment that they're in. It's also not like it's not something that I caused. It's caused by everything around me, right? So if I was enabled, I wouldn't be disabled. It seems like that's the obvious thing, but it's a challenge to the way that we define disability. It's also not a static experience. So how many people have broken a bone? If you were at a workforce and you broke your arm, the theory is that you couldn't type, right? So you'd get help. Somebody would either give you a tool, or they'd type for you, or they'd dictate for you. But when it comes to neurodiversity, and we'll define what that is in a minute, and disability, sometimes it's harder for us to get ourselves there, to orient ourselves, to be socialized to the idea that, like, it really is not necessarily something that is your whole life. Sometimes disabilities can be acquired as well. It's unique to everyone. So I was diagnosed with spina bifida at 18. That's not a common thing. There goes my fidget. That's not a common thing. There it goes again. I'm going to put it down. So when we look at, like, age, all of us are going to get older. That's one thing that we can't fight, which means that most of us, even in this room, are going to experience disability. 1 in 4, in fact. So look around, left and right, up and down. There is somebody at your table that is experiencing some kind of disabling event. And it could be temporary, or it could be permanent. What we are seeing, though, in the disability community is that we are trying and achieving a community. So you might hear language like person-first language or identity-first language. Person-first language might be, I am a person with autism. And professionally, like, we tried to do that to show respect, right? Person before the thing. But I'm going to tell you something. There is not one step that I take in my life that isn't a disabling step. I'm in pain all day, and my day is chaos from the minute I wake up until the minute I go to bed. I'm wearing maternity pants. I have to live with that today. That's not something that I can necessarily, like, cry about. I have to laugh about that because it's ridiculous. But I want to find people who can laugh with me and be in that community with me. So I appreciate the giggles. It makes me feel better. The most important part of my organization's mission is to demonstrate that disability is not always something that you see. I'm walking around. I don't have mobility devices. I don't have, you know, a wheelchair. It's not always going to be apparent to you that somebody has a disabling event. So it's really important to assume good intent. If somebody is in the workplace and they might be causing some challenges, ask yourself whether or not it's the environment before you ask whether or not it's the person. So if a person is in a wheelchair and is unable to enter a building because of steps, by show of hands, what is causing the disability? The person in the wheelchair? The steps. Okay, so it's the environment that we can change. We can add a ramp so that that person can enter the building, right? That person is not getting up out of that wheelchair. It's not possible, which means that by and large, we have facilities, environments, and social behavior that is making it impossible for somebody to feel like they belong. Neurodiversity is this, like, unseen thing, right? It's a non-apparent disability. You don't look at somebody and say, ha, you've got dyslexia, ding, ding, ding. That is not a thing that you can do with neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is the concept that there is a diversity in all of our neurotypes. So I think differently than you think, and you think differently than every single person at your table. There's nothing wrong with it, but it has been seen as this societal barrier, right? That we're different, but we're too different, so it's scary. Being neurotypical, if you think about a bell curve, right? That neurotypical space is the largest community. That's the center of that bell curve. And being neurodivergent kind of sits on both sides of that bell curve. What we're seeing is that that bell curve is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so you will likely run into somebody that's a lot, oh, no way. Crap. You're going to run into somebody that is a lot more neurodivergent than you think. These are some of the diagnoses that we see. And this is kind of who we support as an organization. And if you're curious about any of these diagnoses, you can come and talk to me afterwards. I also want to ask the group, so, given what I've told you about disability, if a neurodivergent person is unable to perform well in their workplace because of meetings being too vague or the instructions being confusing, is that the neurodivergent person's problem? Is it the meeting or the vague instructions? That you can change. So, accessibility is really about creating communities, workplaces, and services that are fully enabling everybody to participate. And that means without barrier. So we have to understand what the barriers are in order to address them. The first is the obvious, the physical barrier, right? You want to make sure that everybody can physically enter a room. And when you think about mobility versus neurodiversity, if you think about autism as a diagnosis, right, and sensory stimulation. So right now, these lights drive me nuts. Can't do anything about it, but they are. I can't see half of you because of the glare. That doesn't mean that I could have worn a baseball cap, right? I could have worn some tinted glasses. So you can address physical barriers for neurodivergence actually really simply, but you have to understand what that person's physical experience is. You also want to look at the way that you communicate. Neurodivergent people appreciate direct communication. None of the circular, well, it would be really nice if you did this by the end of the day. What's the end of the day? Is it 5 p.m. or is it midnight? Because for me, it's midnight. But you expected it by the end of by 5 o'clock. So say you expected it by 5 o'clock. It's not necessary. It's more of a behavioral change that you can support rather than something policy-wise that you have to change. Attitudinal barriers are the hardest to catch, and those are those microaggressions that you might hear. So often women hear, oh, you can't be autistic. You want to know what's going on here? I'll tell you. Right? Now, I am not autistic, so I'm not claiming that, but I've worked with enough autistic women to know that it's incredibly hurtful to hear that. So when we think about, you're trying to be kind and say, oh, it must not be that bad. But there's nothing bad about neurodivergence, and that's, if nothing else, that's what I want you to take away from this talk. Technology and all of the talk about AI, we're hearing AI level the playing field for neurodivergent people. I use it for everything. I take a picture of my refrigerator. I say, what should I eat? I will ask it to read my calendar and tell me what I need to prioritize. It'll highlight the emails that I need to answer by a certain time because it reads them and it tells me the time that I need to respond to them by because I'll delay it as long as I possibly can. When we look at the barriers for neurodivergent people, oftentimes we're seeing them in recruitment. So there are a lot of resume gaps. Resume gaps are not necessarily an indication that somebody isn't working hard. Resume gaps might mean that there are individuals that are really struggling to get through the first step of that interview. And so you'll never see job experience. That doesn't mean that they can't do the job. And that's that competency-based piece. You want to assess whether or not they can or cannot do the job. We also see rigid policy practices around accommodations. I have to fill out 15 documents to get one accommodation. I can't even get through the third document. That's why I need the accommodation. Why are you asking me to fill out all the paperwork? So these are the things that we can change, right? Lack of education is a great place to start. If you don't know about this topic at all, we can chat about that and we can change that really easily. Just to give you an idea on the untapped talent pool, because we were talking about how in South Florida we're seeing this untapped talent pool, there's so many people who want to work. I did look up the unemployment rate, 4.4%. Neurodivergence unemployment rate up to 95%. Sick. That can't be. That can't be. So you have all of these open recs, and you can't fill them. This is a place where you can look, and we can prove to you that these people can do the job. Now, universal design is where environments can be accessed fully by all people. So have you ever heard the phrase, high tides raise all ships? It's the idea that if you do for one, everybody benefits. We're doing research right now where managers are actually benefiting and teaching neurotypical people how to work because they've learned it from their neurodivergent employees. And their teams are outperforming neurotypical teams by 130%. So I want to jump because this is an important piece for you to know for the ROI for business. And this is what I really wanted to talk to you guys about, which I didn't give myself enough time for, which is very typical. I do? That's great. So first and foremost, what we're seeing is that the growing population of Gen Z is really significant. So we will be the majority. before you know it. And if you don't work on it now, if you don't future-proof the work, you're going to have a real problem. Because to the speaker's point, there are people coming in asking for very different things. They're looking for businesses who focus on inclusion, not businesses who focus on salary. They're looking for businesses who focus on benefits packages, not businesses who give the corner office. And this is a growing issue for businesses who are keeping status quo and not necessarily modifying at the pace that they should. We're also seeing that there's an increase 30% productivity-wise when you have neurodiverse teams. Now, neurodiverse teams does not mean that everybody is neurodivergent. Neurodiverse teams include both neurodivergent and neurotypical people. I can't do my job without my neurotypical colleagues. I would never be successful without their help. And they would never be successful without mine. So the complementary nature that EY is doing research on, that JPMC is doing research on with their neurodivergence programs, they're seeing a huge change in the way that they look at retention, the way that they have actual appropriate assessment so that they know that the person can do the job instead of just telling somebody that they can do the job. It's showing up in their profit margins as well. We're seeing lower health spends because people are taking less mental health breaks. These are real research stats. This isn't something that we're just making up. These are actual ROI outputs that when you look at what business is focused on right now, innovation, productivity, retention, right? These are the things that actually make you money. And if you don't hire these individuals, you don't know how to accommodate them, you'll actually start losing money. And we're seeing that in business. People are leaving, leadership shifts are changing. The Cisco CEO a few years ago went on to say that about 25% of CEOs are neurodivergent, mostly dyslexic. And part of the reason is because what we measure is wrong. That CEO can be measured by their creativity, their motivation, their resilience. Where do you think they learned that? By being bullied in school, by their teachers not communicating effectively with them, and by them not having proper learning plans. They didn't learn that because their brains were neurotypical. These are skills that they acquired because they adapted, because they had to. And so if we as business partners don't adapt, we will respond to a growing ecosystem that doesn't know how to be recruited either, right? They're asking for things that we can't give them. So in terms of takeaways, what I want you to take away, hopefully, from this conversation that I took way too much time in sharing with you, was that this disability is not a personal problem. It is the interaction between that person and their environment, and you as business partners can change that environment. I want you to know that neurodiversity is in every single brain. I don't think the way Bev thinks, and that's a great thing. That doesn't need to be that we're two of the same people. Homogeneous teams do not work. Universal design is creating an environment that can be accessed, understood, and supported by all people. How many people would benefit from just saying, I need and I want this environment for my workplace, and then get it? It's really quite a shift in the way that we think. And there are concrete ROIs when we look at business outcomes. We're seeing it in the research now that these programs have existed for 10, 20 years. We're seeing the research that they're doing. Look up what EY is putting out. Look up what JPMC is putting out. Look up what SAP is putting out. They're seeing actual benefit in their outputs, in their revenues. So if nothing else, you all want to make more money, yeah? So then this is the way that we can do that. So I want to thank you so much. If you're curious about any of the work that Specialist Journa is doing, feel free to sign up for that employer newsletter. That's a QR code. We are also hosting a reverse job fair so that you can actually see some of the talent that we offer, and that QR code is with me, so please come and chat with me after this. But I want to thank you so much for having me, and on to the next speaker.